And okay, so this is Angie, and allegedly my final interview with Sabine, the legend. And I just feel like saying that, first of all, when we came together over the Hampstead case, Sabine kind of anointed me as the mouthpiece of Hampstead research, which was, just people all over the world trying to say, we believe the children and let's get to the bottom of it. But then Sabine also fired me. A few years later, I'm like, Sabine, you hired me as the mouthpiece. And she's like, okay, well, consider yourself fired. And I used to say to Sabine, like Sabine would say, I'm half Slavic and I'm very hot-blooded and I speak my mind. And that's the truth. But look, this woman is a legend, and I do believe I've done my part also. And Sabine has some pink champagne, and I've got some cider, and we're just going to celebrate because I don't know. I feel like we can make a difference. The first thing I want to ask you about, who I felt we impacted? Sir Bernard Mumby.
James Mumby.
No, Sir Bernard Mumby was the head of the family courts in
he was called James Mumby. Sir Bernard was the first name of the police officer, Hogan Howe.
Right,
but he was called Sir James Mumby. Actually, that's very interesting that you point that out. He was a lovely guy. I didn't have much in terms of rapport or to do with him. By email, yes, but not personally. But tell me why you think.
Okay, I'll take correction. So I thought it was, so I'm probably thinking of Bernard Hogan Howe.
Yes.
Yeah, who's the chief of police. So Sir James Mumby, I felt like, and I might be wrong, I felt like we kind of changed his mind. We showed him so much corruption in the secret family court system that he ended up speaking up and saying it needs reform.
Yeah, I mean, I would never take credit for it, but I certainly was aware that he was better than anybody before him and that he was trying to make a difference. Yes.
Okay. So tonight I want to ask you, and the other questions were absolutely valid. I wanted to know how you survived prison and how you were and all the rest of it. But I want to ask you, how did they get you? Like, I read mainstream media reports that said, you apologized profusely and the mothers cried and wept in court and you were mortified, and the way it was presented in the mainstream media was that you completely flipped and you stopped believing the Hampstead children. So I won't publish this unless you're comfortable, but can you address that? Did you flip?
I certainly didn't.
Wow.
But I never read any of those mainstream articles.
Yeah, I understand that. I do appreciate that. I understand that.
And I have absolutely no reason to flip, but my stance is and has been to believe the children, partly reconfirmed by the EU directive that in 1992 that says that in case of doubt or just in general, children should always be believed before adults. And that it's pretty obvious. Children have no vested interests. They have nothing to lose. They have no axe to grind, but adults do.
Yeah.
And so it is completely bizarre, but remember, I am under a community behavior order.
Yeah, and this is what I'm kind of sensitive to. Yes.
In theory, it can't be enforced because Germany supposedly doesn't extradite criminals to the UK. But they have, I think they have a bit of a hard problem trying to get as far as that, and I shouldn't maybe be intimidated.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am realistic, and I have become a bit less naive, maybe even. But my nephew, who is a public prosecutor, advised me, it's okay to do an interview, just don't blame anybody so that you get a libel suit.
Yeah, and it's not in my nature or yours to be defamatory or libelous. We've always been in search of the truth. Now we get passionate. I get passionate, for instance, about D notices that were originally intended for things like, you know, you can't broadcast the fact that the lights have gone out in London in case of a bombing incident. You know, like my grandpa fought in the World War One, the whole 4 years on the front line. He was made an exception because he specialized in Morse code and communications. So they kept my grandpa on the front line the whole 4 years. And ultimately it killed him because he had some shrapnel that lodged in his lungs. But they x-rayed him and they said, it's more dangerous for us to try and remove the shrapnel. We're just going to leave it inside of you. And so he came home from World War One and he worked for Ford, Ford Motor Company, the rest of his life. But then just before he was due to retire, they gave him an endoscopy where they put a camera down and it dislodged the shrapnel and it killed him. It killed him at 65. And he had said to my English grandmother, we don't need to take vacations, holidays. We'll just go on day trips, because he said, I promise you, I'll buy us a house by the seaside when we retire. So all my Nana's life, she made sacrifices because my grandpa said, I have investments and savings and we will buy a house by the seaside. And then he died. So my Nana felt so betrayed, you know, that all her life she was waiting for this mythical retirement, but this shrapnel from World War One got dislodged with an endoscopy. And she also lost a son in World War Two. So I'm very aware of what a D notice was created to be. And it's certainly not to hide very, very inflammatory secrets and malpractice under the guise of in the best interest of the child and to maintain the child's anonymity. And this reminds me of what you went to Europe about, because that thing of the risk of future emotional harm was so nebulous, it was able to be used for evil. And I feel the exact same about this thing with the D notice, that it was intended for wartime, it was intended for national security, and it's been absolutely abused. Like it. I don't mind. I got served papers about the Anchor Hill case. I will speak in any court about that, because in the family courts, they disallowed 2 police interviews, which are called Achieving Best Evidence interviews, ABEs. They disallowed a social worker's testimony to whom the child had disclosed. They disallowed a childminder's evidence to whom the child had disclosed. And they disallowed an expert witness. And all of this under the guise of secret family courts. And then by the time they'd established that, here's how clever they were. First of all, they squashed all the evidence in secret family courts. Then Wilfred Wong's trial was open. but they refused to allow the mother to join her trial to Wilfred Wong's. And she had originally pleaded guilty, and her father, who died with the stress of it all, said she was just terrorized. They told her she was looking at 9+ years in prison, so she just caved. But afterwards, she tried to reverse her plea and say, look, that was under duress, and that's certainly not the truth. But they refused to tie her case to Wilfred Wong's. And then Wilfred Wong, for whatever reason, put up the most horrific defense. Horrific. He told lies. He had somebody who's on the Rains list give him a character witness reference. He told the most ridiculous stories, and he put up an absolute non-defense. So then when Anka, the mother, was due to have her trial, the judges said to her, oh, you do know you can't introduce any evidence about your son, because we've already proven in the trial of Wilfred Wong that it's all a load of nonsense.
So he could make the connection between the two cases.
You mean who? Say that.
The judge.
The judges were working together. Anka Hill petitioned to reverse her guilty plea because she said that was under duress. It was huge intimidation. It was huge stress. I'm not guilty. And so I want to stand trial. They wouldn't let her stand trial with the others. So Janet, the therapist and her husband, Edward, and all of them were on trial together. But for some strange reason, they wouldn't allow the mother. Because if the mother had been in the original trial, I believe she would have been able to introduce her evidence bundle. So they told her, yes, you can change your plea, but no, you can't enter your defense along with the others. And then when they found the others all guilty and put them in prison for just ridiculous, just outrageous, amounts of time, and they glossed over the fact that Robert Frith died in prison a few days after being put in prison, it's probably the biggest cover-up, certainly since the Hampstead case. And then when Anka was about to have a trial, they said to her, and it was going to be a different judge, they said, oh, you absolutely can't introduce any evidence because we've already found all the others guilty. It was, I don't know how she's...
There's one title line that I've come up with when, thanks to our conversation, I've been talking to two of my very, very best co-prisoner friends, okay, who have both been working as Mackenzie friends as well, both inside and outside prison.
Wow.
And it's because they can. They just do it because they can, at whatever level.
Yeah.
Whether it's inside the prison as officers, whether it's mental health officers, yeah, whether it's parole, whether it's social services, anybody and everybody who has any kind of position in any kind of institution, they abuse their power and position because they can. And some have more of an influence than others, and some are more detrimental and mean than others.
It's as old as the hills, this thing of abuse of power. You find, some people are attracted to the prison service and the police force and the army and whatever. Some people, if you give them a uniform, they feel very brave and they can hide their narcissism behind a uniform. But let's just get focused again. Like, that's the Anka Hill case, and I am, officially retiring from journalism tomorrow, but I'm still going to tell my story and write my books and, make a homestead and so on and so forth. But there's one thing that will force me out of retirement, and that's if the Solicitor General of the United Kingdom, which also does not have extradition arrangements with Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, as far as I know, if they try and exceed their power to silence me, it will have the absolute opposite effect. I've already, the same way since we've done our shows, I've been contacted by international journalists in Europe that are willing to take up the case, Anchor Hill's case. And they're willing to travel, to do interviews. They're going to coordinate with each other. They absolutely said, look, let us take some of the load. You know, we will get this story out there. So if the Solicitor General genuinely intends to silence the case, they're having the exact opposite effect.
I spoke about D-Notice to a few people as well, because I was at least as outraged about it as you are, because I'm exceedingly aware of my friend Belinda, who got such a thing slammed on her because she was reporting about my case.
Yeah,
and supposedly in my case, there were the same jargon goes, reporting restrictions in place.
It's not acceptable. Well, it's not acceptable.
No, it isn't. Yeah. They have no legal status.
I believe you.
They were exactly, as you said, invented for the purpose of national security.
Yeah.
And they have been abused for the judiciary to protect themselves.
Absolutely abused.
And the time is right to challenge their use of that vehicle.
Yeah. It's an insult. I didn't mean to wax lyrical when I told you about my grandpa and my uncle. Grandpa died from World War One, shrapnel. Uncle died from World War Two. I wasn't trying to pull heartstrings. I'm just saying that those kind of people were what the D-Notice was created for, not to hide secrets and frighten people. I remember when a D-Notice order was slapped on Belinda, and she panicked and she wanted to take everything down off the internet she'd ever published everywhere. And she was like, oh my God, I don't want to go to jail. I've got grandchildren. And that's understandable. And I even thought of that when I got these court papers served to my house. I thought, you know, I could take that route. I could take everything down and, you know, but I just thought, no, it didn't work. It didn't work. You know, it didn't work. So I want to ask you as well, did you plead guilty? I want you to tell me, and as I say, this is subject to mutual editing, but I want you to tell me, did you plead guilty in the end?
No. I never pleaded guilty, but they did what my solicitor called an overkill. They had 21 charges, and I don't remember the details, but sort of in the end, and I guess in the end it doesn't matter whether it's 5 to 7 or 10 to 11 or whatever comes out. The fact was there was enough to just prove me guilty. And let's face it, Angie, they would have done everything to put me into jail.
And that's the reason why I'm standing up, because I feel like if they want to get me, they will, no matter what they make.
Yes.
So why don't I go out telling the truth instead of trying to pacify them by saying, oh, I'm sorry about this and I'm sorry about that, and oops, I didn't know the other, and blah blah. No. Because
I really liked your analysis then when you said that and I both kind of sold out, I think was the term you used.
I didn't mean to be rude, but I did feel like you got bullied. You both got bullied.
But this is completely right.
Yeah.
But Angie, after 9 months in jail, having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go into the court, I was far too worn out to even think about representing myself. And of course, I had zilch experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always good at writing the legal papers. I was never good at taking notes. I hardly ever spoke in court, ever, even when I was in a courtroom. I just, somehow it was too unfamiliar for me.
And our generation, like I'm 66 tomorrow, and you're 78. So, but our generations were trained to honor the court system, the judiciary, the barristers, the solicitors, the experts, just like my parents were trained to believe doctors and so on, you know, surgeons and so on. A lot of people have only, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but a lot of people have only woken up to the Rockefeller health care psyop over the last 2.5 years because of what happened. Up until then, most people believed the doctors, the surgeons, the, you know, the experts, the specialists, blah, blah, blah. So to a lot of people, it's a new revelation. And I only really woke up and trained myself a little bit in self-representation when, and I'm going to say this out loud, and if I have to edit it, I don't mind, but Ricky Dearman put himself and the children back on the internet with an eBay video where he says they won, they were one of the finalists in a promotional video for eBay because the children were selling slime and they had, you know, ticked all the boxes and they got a free flight to America to feature in this international promotional video as, you know, finalists in that. And so somebody sent me the video and said, oh my God, look, it's Ricky and the children. So I did a blog about it, but as a trained journalist, I didn't name them. I did a blog and I said, anybody who's followed my work will feel the same emotions that I feel. And I did a deep analysis of the eBay promotional video, the product that was supposedly being marketed, the fact that it had reached 70 countries, the fact that they were doing demonstrations in facilities for disabled children and so on and so forth, and the fact that it was likely to have a back door which also distributed pornography, you know, child pornography and other things. So, but I was very journalistically clever with my blog. I didn't name them. I used the fake names that they used. But Hampstead Research freaked out the following day and said, oh my God, Angela Power Disney has just exposed Ricky and the children. So then Ricky flew to Ireland and filed a harassment case or allegation against me. And 5 detectives came to my house and took my computer and 2 laptops and a phone and an iPad and all the rest of it. But when I went in voluntarily to make a statement, I said to them, I finally, the penny dropped when, you know, I didn't know why I'd been raided. And they said, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, I did not expose, if you check my,
Yes.
I did not name them. Hampstead Research named them the following day. So pretty much my understanding is the Irish government were like, okay, Ricky Dearman, sorry, you put your children back on the international stage, not Angie. Angie only reported on it. So it didn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. And I think that's infuriated them. But I was shocked. I heard lots. First of all, I think it's illegal, and I'd love Debs and different people to look at this. The fact that videos of mine were shown in your court case and in without me being invited to either be there or address the issues, I think that's unlawful. It was said on record that I was a very dangerous person.
Wow.
told me that the police, including Steve Martin, spent 2 weeks analysing his communications with me. But and I had about 5,000 messages between us going over, I don't know, 2-3 years or whatever. And it said it was a running joke with the police that it took them 2 weeks to analyse our communication.
Yeah.
You know, and so I was like, how dare they play videos of mine in court cases in Southwark Crown Court or reference them without even contacting me, without even saying, do you have any rebuttal? Do you have any comment? You know, what's going on? It's like a kangaroo court.
Yes.
People are running kangaroo courts.
Yes.
And then I want to ask you, because you referenced the storybook people, they didn't tell you straight away that they'd been in contact with what I call the wailing mothers. Like they, you know, Ricky Dearman and Karen Irving and Steve Martin, they have rolled out the same witnesses for court case after court case, which includes 2 mothers that say their lives were ruined and their children's lives were ruined. Well, I'm sorry. I think hundreds of lives were ruined, and you're not the only ones. And you were never arrested. You were never investigated. You were never interviewed. You know,
your innocence was never established.
Yes, exactly. Nor was any due diligence done on the children's allegations.
Yes.
So the wailing mothers were like, to me, they were like almost like it was almost like
a showpiece to create a charade.
Yeah. So it just horrified me. So talk to me honestly. So first of all, I'm shocked that you didn't plead guilty, because I think it was reported that you did. I think it was reported that you pled guilty. You expressed extreme remorse for the suffering of the wailing mothers.
I remember somebody complaining about the fact that I didn't express any remorse. I mean, it can only have been that judge, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, mind the gap between reality and what appears in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched today. Sent me. Now I'm not advocating for him, and I know that there's allegations of different things, but he sent me today the documentary that Tommy Robinson has just made about the lies that mainstream media tell. And Tommy Robinson has made a documentary called Silenced, and it was the way they spun a story. There was a little fight in a playground between 2 boys, but one was a Syrian refugee who'd been in the UK for 2 years, and the other was a white boy. So the mainstream media made up a whole narrative about this poor little Syrian refugee, and GoFundMe's raised 160,000 for him, and the boy that poured water over him or something had to flee. He and his family had to flee because they were getting threatened with death. But Tommy Robinson proved that all the school teachers were given £18,000 each and forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement, not to disclose that this Jamal boy, who'd been in their school for 2 years, was a horrendous bully. He was horrendous. He threatened people with compasses, knives. He told boys that he was going to rape their sisters. He was just an absolute nightmare. But the mainstream media painted him as a poor little Syrian refugee who had been bullied by a nasty white boy. And so I watched today this Tommy Robinson documentary, and it should change. It should put people like Piers Morgan in jail. It should put the mainstream media in jail for the lies they tell. So when I read the write-ups of your prosecution, which Hampstead Research published with great aplomb, I was like, oh my God, she caved, she apologized. She said, so did you ever stop believing the children? That's my
Of
question.
course not.
My God, Sabine.
Absolutely not. That is my whole stance.
Wow.
I mean, and that, in fact, you see, this is what I find philosophically very important and interesting. Where's the borderline between believing and knowing? Carl Gustav Jung was asked whether he believes in God, and he says, I don't believe, I know.
Yeah.
And that is the importance as well. You know, it's where does it start and where does it stop? There is absolutely no reason to doubt. But
Wow.
and
This is
look, the most important thing I think you will appreciate, respect, and understand is that it had to take me to take this case on because it was the worst of all cases I've ever come across.
Yeah.
And everybody else would have found it unbelievable.
Yeah. I got, like, I spent from 2015, you know, I spent years on it, and I went down some deep rabbit holes, and I found lots of issues with the parent Ella and the Abraham and this and that. I went down lots of rabbit holes. But what I have to come back to is that as a survivor myself, I don't believe any children could be hypnotized or tortured or coached into the level of disclosure and the level of corroboration that they had. I just don't believe it's. I know hypnosis can make people do crazy things, but I just don't believe that those children were lying. I think they trimmed a couple of bits here and there, but I'm on record as saying 80% minimum of their disclosures were true. And even if only 10% was true, it was shocking enough that the police should be, that they should be prosecuted for ineptitude. Like, how did they not do forensic examinations of the alleged locations? How did they not arrest all the adults named by the children, including the priest, the headmistress, the nurse, the parents, the social workers, the Kafkas people? That how did they get away with that? This is the shocking thing. And not only they got away with it, you know, Finchley Lido got refurbished, the church got refurbished, you know, all the teachers disappeared from the school for a year. They went down to Devon and Dorset, where there's very active satanic ritual abuse going on. And then when the heat died down, they came back. How, you know, even a mother, at least one of them, many people reached out to Ella and different people saying, yeah, my child too, but I don't know how to get out of this. I'm too scared. I don't know how to escape. Right. It to me, it's a bit like what's going on in America. How can this happen? How can these kind of cover-ups? And then you were supposed to be an example. It's like, oh, if you dare campaign on this, we'll put you in jail for 9 years. Look what we've just done to a disabled 73-year-old genius activist. We put her in jail for 9 years. Look what we've done with Carl Beach. We've put him in jail for 18 years. Look what we've done with Melanie Shaw. We've sectioned her and she's never been heard from again. Look what we've done to John Patterson. We've sectioned him and he's now fully medicated and non-communicative. It's like, and I do realize that people do not rally around child abuse. In Ireland, millions of people protested a few years ago about water charges. But if you say in Ireland, will you come out because children are getting trafficked and raped and abused, you get 200 people maximum, you know.
Well, I'd always felt that the most impressive demonstration was in London when people pushed their empty pushchairs down the street.
Oh,
That says so much, because the removal of the children comes first. The abuse is sort of secondary in people's minds, I think. And of course, the trouble is that there is not only internal family abuse, but also institutional abuse. But that's where the fact that I'm a system analyst comes in. I do not look at a case on its own. It was not the first case that came my way. I look at systems, and systems are all of the cases that I've seen, all of the institutions involved, whether it's social services, whether it's police, whether it's courts. And I see the pattern, and I see the common threads.
Yeah.
And one of the things that outraged me so much was that in one of the court hearings, the document that I had said that, I guess the CPS had produced it, that I had produced some document with 50 details of 50 people. That's when I began to count that list.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out to be 175.
Of course.
So who came up with this number 50 and why?
Yeah.
I mean, I really think what Theresa May called in an article in the Telegraph, the darkest secret in our midst, institutionalized child abuse. It is possible because the criminals are part of these institutions, and they are sworn to cover themselves and each other and cover up. And the media are part of it, and they are sworn in one way or another as well to tell the narrative, whatever they are told. And you see that pattern certainly all over the world as well. It's not unique to the UK.
Theresa May was responsible for losing a lot of documents to do with institutional child abuse, and had her father's records scrubbed from the internet when she came to power. And you got in trouble originally because you were trying to get her help, and then the shit hit the fan and things, leaked and all the rest of it. So I don't think Theresa May is a friend at all. I don't think she's on the right side at all.
No, obviously not. And nobody can be a friend in that situation, I think. The net is very, very tightly knitted. And it is just very, very, very sad, strange, bizarre, and that I would have come across that. I didn't think that's what my soul contract was about, quite frankly.
Yeah, we were all guilty of some naivete and ignorance in thinking people will do the right thing. If we just show them the evidence, they will do the right thing. And sadly, it was far from it. But tell me, if you will, because I'm going to try and keep this to an hour, tell me, if you will, what were the kind of strands of information that this storybook production team extracted from you regarding the Hampstead case?
Remember, I got a list of 12 questions from them at the time, but I don't remember a thing. I don't remember a thing. One bizarre thing I remember is that they asked me to remove my jacket and walk out in the cold while they filmed me going down the street. And it so happens that that is the street down to my physiotherapist. And so I have to remember that, or had to remember that. And then Emily apologized for having to do that. And again, I was just sweet, nice, kind. And I don't know, and I will never watch that film, I can assure you as well. if it gets shown. But I suppose they are just doing their job, and it will be shown. And it just is. First, quite frankly, Angie, thanks to our conversation, I've had the offer of therapy. I've had done my exercises. I feel very, very differently about it all.
Yeah, I'm glad about that.
I can really say, F them.
Yeah.
If they have to sort it out with their gods and their conscience, and I'm sorry they did what they did, and hopefully they will feel sorry too. But the details don't matter. And the case doesn't even matter for that in a strange way, because it's beyond my influence. I can't do anything about it. I mean, if I, how much have I written about it?
Yeah.
And even if I did more about it, it would not make a dent in this institutional net that is knitted together through the criminal money system in the end.
Yeah.
And I grew into this by first organizing the Forum for Stable Currencies, so that I learned to be proud to be poor, because I couldn't. What's the point in trying to make money in a system that is so criminal?
Yeah. There was something I was going to say to you. Oh, one of the sad things, and why I suspect they will air it, is they were known to have said, "Oh, we've spoken to the children, and the children say it was all a lie, and it was all their mother and Abraham made them say these things." It's like, and I feel like people don't understand trauma-based mind control, and they don't understand grooming. Something Aleister Crowley said was, the goal is not to rape children. The goal is to have sex with children where they consent. So it's this, and they're doing this in the schools now and everything. They're doing the grooming and the indoctrination where the victims are so mind controlled, they don't even know that what's happening to them is wrong. And I find that very similar with the Philip Schofield thing with this Matthew McGreevy, this little boy that at 10 years old was in a theatre group, a theatre company, and started getting groomed by the likes of Simon Schofield and Philip Schofield and what have you. And he's still speaking up in their defense. He's still saying, "Oh, I don't want anything bad to happen to them. I don't want them to feel suicidal for raping me as a child, grooming me and raping me." And this is, it's more insidious that they will take the minds of the children. And so the lines get so blurred that people don't know what is child rape and what is not. So if they have convinced Gabriel and Elisa to fully retract their statements as an 18 and 17-year-old, if they've done that, it just compounds the sin even further. It's just, it's almost like saying to humanity, we can mess with your mind so much that you will never know what is truth. You will never know what is truth.
Yeah, and that is the sad thing, except anybody who lives a life that is a little bit introspective, everybody who wants to reflect a little bit about what happens after we die, and everybody who is somewhat aware of the fact that we are not only a body, but that we also have a soul and a spirit, that will question and will ask themselves, and what is going to happen to them when they review their lives, and they feel the pain they have inflicted onto others, and they will presumably regret. But if not, it can't be helped. It's beyond my influence.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm hugely encouraged that you did not plead guilty. You did not change your story about believing the children. I'm horrified that the mainstream media reported that you did. And then we've got 10 minutes left. I just want to do a few questions, and we can edit this out if we have to, but I want to ask a few questions. The first question is, what was options, not adoptions?
What?
You and Belinda are down on the internet, documented in the 60s or 70s, running something called options, not adoptions.
No, not me. Not Belinda. I met Belinda only on the occasion of the Musa case in the 80s.
Okay. I can look that up.
I mean, 80s, I don't even know. It may
I
well have been the 90s even.
wrong, but there was I could, like, maybe
options and adoptions. The term forced adoption was coined by Ian Joseph.
Not forced adoption. The allegation is that Belinda and yourself were offering vulnerable women that you could find a good home for their babies.
What? Bullshit.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right, that's the first question. The next question is, at least two of the people, I can't remember their names now, but two of the people that you and Belinda aligned yourselves with in the early days turned out to be pedophiles. I can't remember their names right. I probably should have got better prepared for this part of the interview, and maybe this is a part that we need to do again. But two of the people that you and Belinda were aligned with, there was one, a bishop, and I used to have these names on the top of my tongue, and I can find them again, but two people that you and Belinda worked or got photographed with or aligned yourself with turned out to be pedophiles.
Aware of having been associated with any bishop whatsoever of any church at all. I mean, I used to live in St. James's Church, Piccadilly, but that was long before my Mackenzie times. And even then, Bishop Tutu slept once above me in the rectory, but that's as close as I got to a bishop.
Okay, I should have done my research better on this stuff. And the final thing the final thing I can think of is John Hemmings. I listened to Esther Baker's testimony, and she was on 60 Minutes in Australia, and her testimony crosses over with mine a little bit to do with Lord Bramall, and I found her quite credible, but she accused John Hemmings and he sued her, and you and Belinda have aligned yourself with John Hemmings MP, and he is very litigious. He's gone after Sonia Poulton, he's gone after Esther Baker. How do you feel about that?
Well, I only use John Hemming as a sponsor just because it looks good on a letterhead. I started my work in Westminster with Lord Sudeley and Austin Mitchell MP, and when the House of Lords got reformed, and Lord Sudeley lost his seat, and by then I somehow came across John Hemming because he named Vicky Haig as the first case in Parliament. So, and his campaign was cause Justice for Families. So I used him as a sponsor. I asked him whether I can list him as a sponsor, and I had a few meetings with him, but about that was it in terms of alignment. I don't really have enough information, but I wouldn't be surprised about the Esther Baker case. I peripherally became aware of it, but in the end, Angie, I had to and I have to find a reason why Providence sent me away from the UK to Germany.
Yeah.
And I feel that I, as a woman, stand a better chance of living what I call my professional life with zest, whereas my social life with meaning was in the UK. In the UK, I met roughly 20 years ago a professor of maths, computing, and physics, and I showed him my prototype on my laptop, which since then has disappeared, courtesy of police.
Oh.
That professor said, this work is the most important since relativity theory.
Wow. Wow.
Would he believe me and help me and do anything, even though he was the director of a company designed to finance startups? And that, to me, is the sign of the class-ridden UK society where males are educated in private, so-called public schools, where males become sexually abused and develop their misogyny. Have far more boys than girls in these schools. So it's a system which is designed and has been historically unequal, full stop.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Wow. I feel like in some ways you were recruited unawares in British society, a little bit as a pawn without knowing that you were such. So I celebrate along with you that you can get a different perspective, even though it must have been such a culture shock to be, ejected from the UK after 30 something years of it being your home. But I do feel, and I won't throw accusations against Belinda to you because I should talk to Belinda about those, but I do feel that you were somewhat manipulated. And I've said that all along because even though I never wrote to you in prison and, I voiced my reservations and my concerns, but I always felt like that you were somewhat of a patsy, somewhat of a engineered into, you have your passion, you have your Slavic and your cultural thing where if you get upset enough, you will speak out passionately. And I feel in some ways as if you were manipulated and used. So I'm glad that you are now on neutral ground, hopefully, in Germany, and away from maybe the matrix that had you in its grasp, So anyway, I'll do a little bit more homework on the bishop and the other person and this different people. You have been photographed. The survivor community is very active. You and Belinda have both been photographed with at least 2 people that turned out to be pedophiles. So, and then there's a question mark with the John Hemming thing, which to me is a valid question mark, even though he could sue me for saying that even. But I don't care. But I just salute you for all you've done. And I do declare and believe that we can question this secret court cases thing and the abuse. It's the same as Kathy O'Brien said. Her final evidence bundle was denied because they said it was a threat to national security. And I've actually heard the court say, we can't reveal this corruption by such and such a judge or such and such a law firm because it would damage the public confidence in the judiciary. So
the public confidence is another one of these formulae of these sound bites that are supposed to pacify and intimidate and justify what they're doing. And we need to learn not to just question and to stand up, but to well, whatever we can do.
Hold people accountable. Hold people accountable. I know parents that have found out the most horrendous corruption information on judges in their cases, And when they've tried to bring that evidence forward, they've been, just as you were, they've been prosecuted for stalking. So when they have tried to tell people, this is the evidence I have of this judge being compromised, they've been accused of stalking the judge. You know, it's diabolical is what it is. So
Yes.
yeah, so I'm looking forward to you know, I'm it's hard for me to resist exposing corruption, but at the same time, it's almost, and now with artificial intelligence, it's almost impossible to glean the truth. And I believe that the thing about deep fake videos and audio imitations and so on, artificial intelligence, I believe it's so that if these evil people that rape children and drink blood and do rituals and so on, their defense, if artificial intelligence has its way, their defense can always be, oh, it's a deep fake, it's not me, that's just made up. You know, that's like, it's like somebody described it as living in a post-truth world. So I celebrate you going into your mathematical sweet spot, and I celebrate myself wanting to go back to the land and horses and dogs and, you know, nature. But at the same time, we both know that we will never be fully silenced. So I just want to thank you.
Well, very well said, Angie. But I just want to tell you that when I discovered what was going on, slowly but surely, I spoke with Ian Josephs as the expert of family courts and social services, and he had coined the term forced adoption. And I asked him, what the hell can we do?
Yeah, yeah.
And he had been in it for 50 years or so at the time.
Wow.
And he said, exposure, exposure, exposure.
And we've done that. Like sometimes people say to me, what have you done? Well, we have raised the public consciousness in quantum amounts in terms of what on earth is satanic ritual abuse, what on earth is child pornography, child exploitation, child trafficking, child rape and murder, what on earth is this whole thing? You know, it's from when we started speaking in 2015 to now, it's a different world. So we've served our time. It will just break my heart if Gabriel and Lisa come forward, mind controlled and hypnotized and threatened and blackmailed and bribed into saying, oh, we made it all up. You know, so
I bet they will, Angie.
yeah,
I bet they will.
And I think that's what this production company was saying. Well, you know, because I'll say his name again, I might edit it out, but even said afterwards he kind of realized he'd been a little bit duped, and he emailed saying, you do know, I don't believe for a minute those children made that up. And their response was, oh, well, we've spoken to them and they've verified that they made it up. So it's you know, only God, I think only God will just turn this around. Only God. If we try and fight the evil with the same level of, we can't. It's a spiritual war, and only God will bring the truth to bear. And I still have hope that the children will ultimately say it was true. We weren't lying. We weren't lying. You know. All right.
I have.
We've done an hour. Is there anything I've missed out?
Oh, I don't think so.
I think you look amazing. You look so feminine and soft and healed, or healing. Healing is probably more appropriate word.
Thank you. Well, I very consciously put on the same shirt that I wore on the picture that you put up. So I feel I'm closing the loop. It's a little déjà vu.
That's lovely. Yeah, because my Lithuanian assistant helps me select the photos, and he's like, "No, we're going to find a beautiful photo of Sabine, and that's going to be the branding of it." So I'm so happy about that. All right, listen, Sabine, it's an honor, and we'll stay in touch. You know we will.
Well, I hope. I mean, it's far too interesting to talk to you.
And I'm grateful because you and I, sometimes we fell out. You know, sometimes you were really tough with me, and I've made mistakes. I'll admit that. I have sometimes made mistakes. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. So anyway,
Well, I'm sorry if I've offended you ever.
no, yeah, and I'm sorry if I if I smeared your name. Yeah, no, because me getting back in touch with you was straight from the heart, and I stand by that. I stand by that.
Well, we had a good time.
We did, and if God orchestrates it, we'll talk again, and if not, we'll talk offline. All right, God bless.
Okay.
All right.
Bless you.
Cheers.
Bye for now.
Jesus loves us.
Yeah.